June 22, 1941, near Grodno, western Belarus. Dawn breaks in streaks of gray and amber over the fields of the Eastern Front. Dew clings to the tall grass as Panzer III engines growl, pushing east toward the Soviet border. The Wehrmacht columns stretch for miles, trucks, motorcycles, and armored carriers moving like a steel serpent through the mist. Oberfeldwebel Kurt Reinhardt, commander of a mortar section in the 18th Panzer Division, watches the sky turn from pale gold to smoke gray. Operation Barbarossa has begun. "Nothing can stop us now," says his loader, grinning as he wipes the soot off his hands. "These Russians still fight with horses." Laughter ripples through the column. German confidence is unshakable. The Red Army is retreating in chaos. Villages burn and Soviet tanks lie gutted by the roadside. But that night, as Reinhardt's unit bivouacs near a small forest clearing, they hear something they've never heard before. A deep, rising howl, like a mechanical scream mixed with the roar of a storm. "Was this Das?" one soldier mutters, looking toward the eastern tree line. The sound builds, higher, sharper, and then the night explodes. A wall of fire erupts beyond the forest. Trails of flame arc through the air, streaking in parallel lines before slamming into the ground. The impact is instant and catastrophic. Earth shatters, trees vanish in fireballs, as shockwaves ripple through the German positions. Reinhardt hits the dirt, his helmet ringing from the concussion. The sky is lit blood red, and the air smells of burning oil and sulfur. When the last echoes fade, a stunned silence blankets the survivors. "What the hell was that?" Someone gasps. An officer, pale and shaking, stumbles forward. "Not artillery," he whispers. "Something else." The Germans would soon learn its name: BM-13 Katyusha, the world's first mass-deployed rocket launcher. But for now, the only thing they understand is fear. June 23, 1941, outskirts of Minsk. Smoke still drifts across the ruined tree line as German engineers comb through the wreckage. The ground is cratered and blackened, littered with twisted metal and torn bodies. Whatever struck this sector hadn't come from conventional guns. Hauptmann Erich Voss, artillery officer of the 18th Panzer Division, kneels beside a shallow impact crater. He picks up a mangled steel tube the length of his arm, scorched and bent. Fins, warhead, a rocket. He turns to his aide. "Find out what unit was responsible for this strike." "We're not dealing with field guns anymore." From a captured Soviet prisoner, they finally hear the word whispered like a curse: Katyusha. The Germans scoff at first. Intelligence reports describe it as a crude truck-mounted rocket launcher, rails welded to a standard ZIS-6 or Studebaker US-6 truck chassis, firing rows of unguided rockets. Unstable, inaccurate, impossible to aim properly. "Ha!" laughs one of the gunners. "A farmer's toy. They build it in a barn and call it artillery." But 2 days later, that laughter dies. On the morning of June 25th, a Soviet battery from the 4th Guards Mortar Regiment sets up in a birch grove outside Minsk. The men work in silence. 15 trucks, their rails glinting in the early light, are aligned toward the advancing Germans. Each carries 16 132mm M13 rockets, warheads packed with nearly 5 kilograms of TNT apiece. Captain Ivan Flerov, commander of the first Katyusha unit ever deployed in combat, gives a curt nod. Range confirmed. Enemy in the open. The ignition signal flares. For 6 seconds, the forest screams. The sound is unlike anything on Earth, a piercing hellish chorus that makes even Soviet troops flinch. Rockets streak into the air in perfect formation, trailing white smoke, then descend like divine wrath. On the German lines, men drop their rifles and clutch their ears as the world erupts. The barrage annihilates an entire artillery battery and tears open a convoy of half-tracks. Flames reach 20 meters high. Ammunition cooks off like fireworks. Reinhardt's section is thrown backward by the shockwave. "Mein Gott," he gasps. "It sounds like an organ." The name spreads through German ranks almost instantly. Stalinorgel, Stalin's organ, a mocking nickname born from terror. The irony isn't lost on Soviet soldiers, who adopt it with grim pride. From that day forward, the Germans no longer laugh. Whenever they hear that shrieking wail, they run for cover, because they know death is seconds away. But this was only the beginning. The Red Army had just realized the psychological weapon they possessed. And soon, entire cities would burn beneath its roar. July 16, 1941, west of Smolensk, Russia. The air is thick with dust and the bitter stench of fuel. Columns of German armor grind toward Smolensk, the gateway to Moscow. The city's defenses are crumbling. Soviet rifle divisions are retreating in disorder, their artillery silent, their skies dominated by Luftwaffe bombers. To the men of the Wehrmacht, victory seems certain. But hidden among the birch and pine on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, Captain Ivan Flerov and his battery wait in grim silence. Their orders: hold fire until the enemy is fully across the bridge. Range 1,000 meters, a gunner whispers. Let them come closer, Flerov replies. His face is calm, but his hand tightens on his binoculars. Across the river, Oberfeldwebel Kurt Reinhardt is supervising his men as they prepare to cross. The bridge creaks beneath the weight of fuel trucks and ammunition carriers. He looks up. The dawn is unnaturally quiet. No artillery, no planes, just the low hum of engines and the river's sluggish current. Then the sky begins to wail. 16 Katyusha trucks ignite in unison. The sound rolls like thunder, a rising, unholy scream that seems to come from the air itself. White smoke bursts from the tree line, followed by streaks of flame that arc high above the Dnieper. Reinhardt freezes. For a single second, every man on the bridge looks up, and then the world turns into hell. The first rockets slam into the riverbank, blasting apart vehicles and men. The second wave hits the bridge directly. A fuel truck erupts in a massive fireball, sending shards of metal and burning fuel across the deck. Soldiers leap into the river, their uniforms aflame. The bridge buckles under the inferno and collapses into the water. From his observation post, Flerov lowers his binoculars. The bridge is gone. The German spearhead halted, not by tanks or infantry, but by trucks firing into the sky. He turns to his men. Reload. We move before the Luftwaffe finds us. The battery drives off into the forest, leaving behind only scorched earth and a river choked with twisted metal. For the Germans, the attack is devastating, not just in losses but in morale. Reports flood back to headquarters describing unprecedented rocket bombardments that destroy entire formations in seconds. Commanders demand countermeasures, but none exist. The Katyusha has changed the battlefield. By August, Soviet engineers are already working to mass-produce the launcher. Simpler, faster, more mobile. Mounted on ZS-6 Lend-Lease Studebakers, even tractors if needed. The order from Moscow is clear. Every front, every division, bring the fire of Stalin to the enemy. The howl of the Katyusha begins to echo across Russia, from Smolensk to Leningrad, from the Don to Stalingrad. It becomes not just a weapon, but a symbol, the voice of vengeance in steel and flame. And in the chaos of that summer, Captain Ivan Flerov will become both a hero and a ghost. October 7, 1941, near Vyazma, 230 kilometers west of Moscow. Autumn has turned the Russian steppe into a quagmire of mud and misery. The German blitzkrieg that once roared like a hurricane now crawls at a snail's pace. Engines choke, boots sink. Supplies vanish into the endless mire. For Captain Ivan Flerov and his battery of Katyushas, the same men who unleashed the first rocket barrage at Minsk, the situation is desperate. The German 10th Panzer Division is closing in from the west. The Soviet front has collapsed. Flerov's orders from Moscow are stark. Do not let the enemy capture your equipment alive. The captain stands beside his lead truck, the steel rails streaked with rust and soot. His men, exhausted and starving, look to him for direction. We'll strike one last time, Flerov says quietly. Then we destroy everything. At dawn, they roll their battered trucks into position atop a low ridge overlooking the German advance. Fog drifts through the trees. The sound of panzer engines hums faintly in the distance. Elevation, range ready, a gunner reports. Flerov raises his hand. Fire. The ridge erupts in flame. The final volley screams into the fog, 48 rockets tearing across the valley. German tanks vanish in geysers of earth and fire. Ammunition wagons explode. The attack shatters the entire spearhead, halting the advance for hours. But the price is death. German reconnaissance planes spot the launch. Within minutes, Stuka Die bombers descend on the ridge. The ground shakes as bombs detonate around the trucks. Shrapnel cuts through the forest. Take cover! Flerov shouts, but he doesn't move. He stands by the last intact Katyusha, lighting a flare in his trembling hand. His men watch in silence as he signals the final detonation charge. The battery, the first in Soviet history, disappears in a single, deafening explosion. When German infantry reach the site hours later, they find nothing left but melted steel and cratered earth. No trucks, no rockets, no survivors. One officer writes in his report, "We have destroyed what appears to be a new type of Russian artillery. It is crude, yet terrifyingly effective. The enemy chose death over surrender. Captain Flerov and his men are never found." For months, the Soviets list them as missing in action. But in Moscow, word spreads among artillerymen, the legend of the ghost battery that unleashed hell and vanished into flame. By early 1942, the Red Army forms new Guards mortar regiments in his honor. Hundreds of Katyushas roll off the assembly lines. Their howling becomes the anthem of revenge as Soviet forces prepare to strike back. The weapon that once shocked the Germans at Grodno is now mass-produced, refined, and relentless. Soon, entire divisions will march under its roar, and German cities will learn what Stalin's organ truly sounds like. November 19, 1942, Stalingrad front, near Kalakan Don. Snow drifts down in whispering sheets over the frozen steppes. The Volga glitters like dull steel beneath the pale winter sun. For weeks, both armies have been locked in the deadliest struggle of the war. The ruins of Stalingrad soaked in blood and ash. Inside a camouflage tree line west of the city, dozens of Katyusha trucks stand ready. Their launch rails rise like organ pipes against the sky. The crews, veterans of 100 retreats, are silent now, their breath fogging in the cold. Colonel Alexander Novikov, commander of a Guards mortar regiment, walks slowly down the line of vehicles. He runs his gloved hand along one of the rails. The paint is blistered from constant firing. The soldiers glance at him, waiting for the word. Novikov glances east toward the German encirclement. Through his binoculars, he sees columns of enemy vehicles, the Sixth Army, confident, overstretched, and unaware that the trap is about to close. He lowers his binoculars and speaks calmly. Today, comrades, the motherland takes back her breath. At 7:20 a.m., the first signal flare arcs into the sky. The forest ignites in sound. Hundreds of rockets roar from their rails, streaking into the dawn like flaming arrows. The ground trembles. From miles away, it sounds like a colossal organ playing the music of destruction. German officers in forward trenches look up, frozen in disbelief, as the sky rains fire. The bombardment lasts only 30 seconds, but in that time entire regiments vanish. Supply dumps detonate. Fuel trucks erupt into columns of black flame. The shockwave shatters windows 20 kilometers away. An SS officer, his face covered in soot, yells to his men, "Run! Get out of the open!" But it's useless. The second wave comes before they can move, and then a third. When the firing stops, the horizon itself seems to burn. For the Soviets, this moment marks more than just revenge. It's a turning of the tide. The Katyusha, once mocked as a crude truck, has become the hammer of Stalin's counteroffensive. German soldiers begin calling it the Screaming Death. Captured reports describe the psychological devastation. Greater than men drop their rifles and clutch the earth. Even veterans are paralyzed. The sound. It is not human. Soviet infantry charge through the smoke, advancing behind the bombardment. Their rifles gleam in the firelight. In the distance, tanks rumble forward. T-34s with red stars painted fresh on their armor. For the first time, the Red Army is on the offensive. And at its spearhead sings the voice of vengeance, the song of Katyusha. By the end of November, the encirclement of Stalingrad is complete. The once invincible Wehrmacht Sixth Army is trapped. Their radios crackle with desperate pleas for airdrops and rescue that will never come. Above the frozen ruins, soldiers on both sides can still hear that sound echoing across the river. The eerie, metallic wail that precedes annihilation. They call it Stalin's organ. The Soviets call it victory. April 25, 1945, outskirts of Berlin, Germany. The once proud capital of the Reich lies beneath a choking haze of smoke and dust. Streets that once echoed with parades and speeches are now littered with rubble, twisted steel, and the burned-out carcasses of tanks. In the distance, the Red Army's artillery thunder rolls like an approaching storm. Between the bursts of cannon fire comes another, unmistakable sound. The howling chorus that once terrified German soldiers 4 years earlier near Grodno. The Katyusha has come to Berlin. Lieutenant Sergei Antonov, commanding a battery of BM-13N launchers, stands beside his truck on the edge of a shattered railway yard. His men work methodically, adjusting rails and checking ignition cords. The air smells of cordite and rain. Antonov looks toward the city's skyline. What remains of it? "That's the Reichstag," he murmurs, pointing to the faint silhouette amid the smoke. "Comrades, this is where it ends." The order crackles over the radio. Target central Berlin. "Fire at will." Antonov raises his hand. "Light it." The launchers erupt in a storm of fire and fury. Dozens of rockets tear into the dark sky, leaving trails of white smoke that arc toward the city's heart. A moment later, Berlin itself seems to ignite. Entire city blocks vanish in blossoms of flame. From the basement of the Reich Chancellery, the muffled explosions rumble like distant thunder. German officers glance upward in panic as plaster falls from the ceiling. One aide mutters, trembling, "Stalinorgel." It's the same sound from the east. In that moment, The journey of the Katyusha, from a crude secret project in 1941 to the most feared symbol of Soviet vengeance, comes full circle. The weapon that once defended the forests of Smolensk and the ruins of Stalingrad now rains fire upon the capital of the Third Reich. Outside, Antonov's crew cheers as the last salvo fades. They know the end is near. Soviet infantry advance under the rocket barrage, storming through the ruins of Berlin with bayonets fixed and flags unfurled. By May 2nd, the city falls. The red banner rises above the Reichstag. Silence, after years of chaos. When the guns go quiet, Antonov walks among the wrecked streets. He sees the burned remains of a German truck, not unlike the ones they used to mount the first Katyushas 4 years ago. He stops, kneels, and runs his hand across the rusted metal. "Flerov," he whispers, almost to himself. "We finished your song." The wind carries the smell of smoke and victory through the ruins. From the ashes of Grodno to the frozen banks of Stalingrad, to the broken stones of Berlin, the howling of the Katyusha marked every turning point of the Eastern Front. It was not just a weapon, it was a promise. A promise that every field burned by the invader would one day be avenged by fire. And when that fire finally reached Berlin, it sang its last note, the final terrible chord of Stalin's organ.